Thank you, colleagues from COSTAT, for hosting the Big Data Conference, the sixth ones now in a row, and we're delighted to be here with you. Unfortunately, it is not physically present, but remotely. But we hope to make it up when the situation clears up, to come and actually visit you in Seoul and your country. I have the pleasure to and honor to moderate this session on the session 5 on the monitoring the social economic impact of the COVID-19. And we have an excellent panel of 7 speakers this morning, this afternoon, and this evening, in 2 segments actually. One is a segment on a global perspective, which we will start with, which provides 3 excellent speakers and experts from the international organization. The first one that kicks off is Marky Mariwan from UNSD, is part of my team, followed by Diego Alexandro Cordera from the IMF. He is a senior economist from the Asia Pacific department. Both will cover the topic of trade and transport using AIS data, a very latest development which has turned into a dashboard that they will show, but also latest techniques that really show the power of big data, actually be able to provide real-time data, as they will show you. So that has been great progress through international collaboration. Complemented to that is the work done by ICAO, and particularly Sai and his team has done excellent work in the using flight tracking information to actually complement that work on the vessel tracking information, to provide information on passenger transport, flights, and the like, in a similar sort of fashion that provides considerable insights in transport, of course, related to tourism and passenger transport, but also increasingly, I don't know whether you would talk about that, but I'm aware about that, the work that basically allows to use the volume data to turn into actually value-added information, which is a very interesting sort of development. Complemented to that, we have a part B, which will provide the country perspective on their COVID responses. Catherine Smythe from ABS Australia will showcase the latest development in the use of scanner data, which has become increasingly going to the fore in the wake of COVID, to actually measure the CPI. And I'm delighted that she's with us to show that results. And actually, again, not talking this from a research perspective, but actually seeing that we are start using, big data from scanner data information combined with other data to actually produce official statistics. I'm also delighted to have Chaim Chesering from NSB Bhutan, the chief statistician from Bhutan, to actually inform us about the poll surveys that they have undertaken in Bhutan, to actually inform the social economic impact in Bhutan, which is also very recent, and he will provide the latest results and the insights that they have obtained through their survey. Again, early results coming out of the need to inform policymakers and the public around the impact, the social economic impact of COVID. Delighted also to have Mr. Yo from the Samyung University from Korea, who provides an excellent overview of the impact on consumption patterns in Korea on COVID. Very insightful. That also will significantly support policymakers in taking the decisions that are necessary to support the business societies as well as the population in Korea. So very insightful information also. And then delighted to have also Dr. Uzer, chief statistician from Malaysia, who will also provide insights from the survey that they recently have done, also a pool survey providing information about the recent impact of COVID on the Malaysian society and economy. So excellent speakers, which I'm delighted to bring to you. We will have 2 segments. Each will speak about 7 minutes. which will allow us ample time for Q&A. So we will have 3 speakers first for the global perspective. That will be followed by a Q&A for about 15 minutes. And then we will have 4 speakers followed by a Q&A again for about 20 minutes. So I hope that the audience will provide us ample questions. Also myself, I'm prepared also to pose a couple of questions to the distinguished speakers. So I also would like to indicate that I have my dear friend Ronald Jansen, my colleague from United Nations Statistics Division, joining us more on the backside, as you will, to assist me in bringing the questions forward that come from the audience. So that's the full team. Thank you for attending this session 5. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Marky. Marky, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be able to make presentations on these sessions, and I would like to thank the organizer for the invitations. On these occasions, I would like to introduce the recently released dashboard containing high-frequency statistics and experimental data in trade, transport, and travel. This is a collaborative effort by various organizations and individuals attempting to take advantage of big data sources for calculating various experimental indicators such as global port calls, the volume of seaborne trade, and activities of air transports. The underlying data is available daily, but they may be presented in the dashboard as a weekly or a monthly frequency. These can be used as a proxies for monitoring economic activities. In addition, monthly detailed trade data submitted to UN Comtrade was also included to provide comparative views between figures generated from big data sources and those submitted as official statistics. Of course, there is a release lag between experimental and official data. The dashboards are available in the marketplace of UN Global. Why trade, transport, and travel? The answer is straightforward. It is because of global availability and accessibility of the datasets, notably AIS for ship trackings and NDSB ICAO for flight datasets. Please note that UN Global Platform location services contain those 2 datasets and they have been regularly utilized. In this regard, the AIS task team is quite active and it is currently undertaking AIS Hackathon this week as part of Big Data Conference activities. The AIS data of certain vessel types could be a proxy of international trade in goods because most merchandise is transported by sea. And ADSB can be an indicator for business and personal travel as well as air cargo. Custom data is the main source of international merchandise trade statistics, and they are generated regularly as part of custom formalities during export and imports. This is a reason that the data collection is not interrupted during the restriction on movement of people. Even though monthly trade data has 1 or 3 months lag, they are considered as important economic datasets, especially in those countries which are part of the global value chain. The dashboards currently contain the following statistics and data. The weekly port calls monitoring the port calls of a vessel engaging in international trade from around 1,200 ports based on AIS datasets available at the UN Global Platform. Trade volume in metric tons, the world's seaborne trade in real time, a proof of concept for building AIS nowcast from scratch. The interactive data query tool is also provided. The flight operational and economic impacts. The operational impacts show a comparison of monthly passengers and cargo for international and domestic flights in 2019 and 2020. Whereas the economic impact show estimates of revenue, passengers, and seat losses. The most important thing is that the underlying data are updated weekly, and they would be reflected in the dashboard immediately. Soon, more data and dashboard would be added. The dashboard with interactive graphs and tables would bring complex big data to end user as meaningful information. As I have mentioned earlier, they could be part of the data pipeline so that it would reduce the maintenance of the dashboards. Note of caution: a dashboard is not a storytelling tool, but it could be a useful data exploratory tool. I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marky, for that presentation. Again, the audience, you saw that the international organization making great progress in actually using big data, in this case vessel tracking information, to generate dashboards that gives real-time data around the development of the pandemic, and what we now have the possibility, also in collaboration with the IMF, which will be presented by Diego, is that we take it a step further. We take it a step further, not only to get information on port calls of vessels and get an idea around the movement of trade, but actually also generate monetary numbers on trade by combining additional information with the vessel tracking information. I'm delighted to introduce Diego, who has been the expert that has put these new numbers together that are really revealing. They're experimental, but good enough for purpose that we use them for. So Diego, please inform the audience about where we are in actually getting monetary numbers on trade going forward. Diego, the floor is yours.
I wanted to start by thanking the organizers for inviting us to present our work on World Seaborne Trade nowcasting. This is joint work done with Andrzej Komoromi, Yang Liu, and Moon Said. The four of us are at the IMF. And before anything, I should say that, of course, the views here expressed are ours and do not necessarily represent the views of the IMF, its board, or its management. This should be understood as a research project that we started back in 2018. We have a sense that back in 2018, people perhaps needed a bit more convincing than now about the usefulness of timely economic activity indicators. In the case of trade, providing a weekly assessment of the state of world trade is challenging. What we understand is the gold standard trade volume indicator at the global level has an effective lag of essentially 3 months, and the trade finance transactions that we can extract from SWIFT cover less than 15% of world trade and do not directly measure trade volumes. So where did we go looking for solutions? As many of you know, more than 80% of trade by volume takes place by sea, more than 70% by value, and virtually all ships in the world vessel fleet are equipped with a device called AIS, that stands for Automatic Identification System, that periodically emits a signal for navigation safety purposes. And you can think of this, if you're not aware of this technology, it's similar to the transponders that airplanes have. And these signals are picked up by terrestrial stations or satellites, depending on where the ship is around the world. And we thought that if we could somehow decode those messages, we could literally see international trade happening in front of us. But of course, we need some structure in order to use this information to nowcast trade. And this is how we went about putting some structure. First, we used a spatial clustering algorithm to identify areas on the map that are presumed to be ports. And We use publicly available information to map these areas to ports and to countries. The second thing we did is train a classifier to tell us for each ship stepping onto each of these areas, whether the visit was related to trade or if the ship was simply passing by. The third thing we did is use information on how deep the ship is into the water to estimate the volume of trade and also whether it's related to imports or to exports. And the final thing, which we emphasize in the paper, is as important as the previous three steps, is benchmarking our estimates to official statistics. At the country level, we did this using information from the Netherlands Bureau for Economic Policy Analysis. And at the sectoral level, for crude oil trade, we use data from the Joint Organizations Data Initiative. We find that our estimates have a reasonably good fit for most countries and for the world as a whole, and we emphasize in the paper the usefulness of our results for macro nowcasting, event studies, and sectoral analysis. But in the interest of time, let me just give you one small example of things that one can see with these estimates. And what I'm showing in this chart is our estimate of exports at the world level taking place by sea starting in January this year, January 1st. And with the estimates, so these are daily estimates and they are normalized to the average estimate of the previous 3 years. You can see the roller coaster pattern in the evolution of world trade that is so specific to this crisis, as the virus first spread in Asia and soon afterwards was spreading elsewhere in the world. And you can see some recovery towards the end of the sample that ends 2 weeks ago, and but still persistent weakness, especially in this chart showing the case of vehicles, presumably as households are cutting back on the consumption of durable goods. Of course, there are many more details in the paper that I hope people have a chance to look at. Let me close by saying that our country-level estimates are available online, and great thanks to our colleagues at the UN who have made the estimates available to visualize and also to download. And here I'm referring to our estimates of metric tons of exports and imports at the country level for every country that has coastline, of course. There are further details and some more estimates in the zip file that we also update once a week with daily estimates, and this zip file can be downloaded from the website where the working paper is located. But with that, thank you very much, and I am looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego, for that presentation. And again, excellent work showing the progress that we're making internationally as agencies, but also I should say that these techniques and these data are available for countries to actually start applying these techniques and these data to their own circumstances and apply it. So, for instance, in UK ONS in Britain, they actually use this data also for an experimental statistics on trade and transport. So we see increasingly countries applying these techniques also in their own national circumstances, which is an important development. Seamlessly, I think we have a presentation by Sai from ICAO, the International Organization on Airlines. Sai, I look forward to your presentation. It is also part of the international collaboration that we have with you and the IMF in presenting this in the dashboard. I find it fascinating information, how well we can use the flight tracking information to provide great information and insight on the development of the pandemic. With that, Sai, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivo. Good morning, good evening, good night, all participants. I again thank the organizers for inviting me. So ICOs experience in using big data sets, it started from 2015 when we started working with the ADSB and MIDT data. For those of you who are not in the know, ADSB is the flight tracking data set, which we stream from our data provider. And the MIDT is the actual sales data, which we get from the global distribution systems. So combining this, we have a very powerful set of data, which we call as big data, which encompasses both the operational parameters as well as the actual monetary parameters, the sale parameters, the value provided from the sale of tickets or cargo. So this is an excellent, big data set, which we use in complement with the official data reported to us by member states. So what we did was since 2015, when we started looking at the ADSB and MIDT data, our experience was that since it's transactional data, the quality of data is very, very good, and the coverage of data, considering that aviation is a highly technology industry with most reservations and tracking available, in the computerized electronic format, the coverage is close to 95%. So, but there were the sheer volume of the data as well as the understanding the data, since there was no defined methodology, took us a couple of years. But once we got through that learning curve, we could quickly scale it up and link it to other data sets, namely to reference tables, to air carriers, to member states, to airspace of regions, to reporting data, converting the operational data into other operational statistics, as well as the sales data into value in terms of dollars. So after the initial learning curve of 2 years, we could really scale it up very fast using the power of cloud computing, and we basically stream all this to our Azure platform, and all our algorithms and codes are written straight on the cloud, and the information is generated on a daily basis. So this was a godsend opportunity for us, because we could for the first time get a complete overview of the industry, both the operational as well as the actual revenue side of it. So what we did was we also combined it with other platforms. For example, we combined it with the System of National Accounting framework, with our own statistics, as well as the statistics of other agencies like the UNWTO, as well as the multilateral banks, as well as with the United Nations. We have been working closely, and we have come out with a set of dashboards, which Maki briefly explained. These dashboards are available online. I don't want to take too much of your time, but if you just Google COVID-19 ICAO dashboards, you'll see 6 or 7 dashboards, which encompasses all the operational impacts due to the COVID pandemic, as well as the economic impacts, both before COVID and post COVID. And this is at a very high level of granularity. It is at the level of country as well as route pairs. So you can see the impacts not only at a country level aggregated, but also at a route level, for example, from the US to UK. So you can query it yourself and generate it and also download it in any format you want. So this dashboards are already available. Now, as Maki mentioned, what we are doing is we are now combining it with 2 data sets, namely the tourism data set, as well as of the United Nations, and the cargo data set, which Maki is collecting through the cargo airway bills submitted with the Customs Department. So in maybe in a month's time or in 1.5 months' time, we should be also able to give a very good dashboard, which tells the audience out there, the policymakers out there, the value added which has been lost in terms of loss of cargo thanks to the pandemic, as well as the tourism losses, so that policymakers are aware of the economic impacts. Finally, to conclude, we will say that we are also working on algorithms which will also be made available in the next month, which will also provide a lead indicator, because air cargo is a very good lead indicator of GDP. So we should be able to see whether GDP is picking up and whether the impact of the COVID pandemic is waning. So we have made all available all these dashboards. I again request the audience to take a look at it. And to conclude, I just want to say one thing, that in times of this, like pandemic, we can really appreciate the value of big data, because definitely there is a difficulty of the official statistics being submitted by member states. In such cases, big data is like really a boon for us, to come out with interactive dashboards and statistics using unofficial data sets, which can be used by policymakers to determine the fiscal or monetary interventions, as the case may be. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Sai, for making that presentation. Again, a great example of using high frequency volume information in turning that in monetary numbers that really can inform us about the development of the economy in terms of tourism, in terms of more broadly also about GDP, as we have heard from Sai. So these are very promising developments that basically show the progress that has been made over the years that actually now results in actually very concrete experimental numbers that are looked at by policymakers and taken into account when developing the policy. So great progress. I have some question here that come from the audience. One, a simple one, Sai, we can be making available presentations of what you presented orally. I know that is available. We could be sharing links to actually webinars that Sai and his colleagues have done, even with UNSD colleagues. So the answer, Sai, I can indicate that we can provide much more information, and you already gave the link to your own work at ICAO. So the answer is yes. Sai?
Most certainly, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. So the answer is yes. This is all documented, it's all available, even on webinars, and they continue to provide webinars in explaining all these developments, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, I would like to pose questions around this, if I may, and we are right on time, so we have about 10 minutes, so basically allowing each of you about 3-4 minutes to actually respond to my question. And I do them in order. I start with Marky, then Diego, and then I go to Sai. I read the questions in the sense that the pandemic required a lot of innovative data solutions that we have heard, basically to meet the new demands that came to actually inform the impact of the pandemic and how we move and transition through the pandemic. The question is that this requires quite an amount of co-investment, as we have heard. We work together, we share information. So Marky, my question to you would be, what are the challenges going forward in actually co-invest and continue to co-invest with countries and agencies to actually provide further insight and in terms of data, in terms of methods, in terms of training to make this information available? What sort of challenges do we have to overcome as you see them, and how can they be overcome on the short term, because people want to use this? Is UN Global Platform, as we have it, a platform that we can come together as a community? Your views? Marky, are you still online? Marky, I see you're still online.
Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry.
Marky, did you hear my question?
No, because I lost connection for a while. Could you?
Okay, so let me do it again. So basically, what we see from the presentation that there's been quite enormous amount of innovative work done by international organizations, sometimes in combination by national statistical offices, and you can say something about your own work in this area. And the question is, we have to take this forward in terms of providing access to data, to methods, and technology to actually allow also countries and other international agencies benefiting from this work. But there are challenges. What are those challenges, and how can we overcome them to actually start to co-invest and co-sharing these results better than we have done now on individual platforms? Your views?
Okay, thank you, Ivo, for a very relevant remark. Because one of the challenges in utilizing big data is the acquisition of the data itself, and the platform that used to process the data, right? We know that this require a lot of investment. I mean, Sai just mentions that he needed around 2 years, right, to accustom with the flight data and everything. And I'm sure also Diego will, he and his team needs a lot of time and resources also to understand and process and to arrive to the conclusions. So I would like also to underline that, I mean, we do have a shared platform, what is called this global platform, right? And I think this is quite advanced and in terms of innovations, because the platform is intended to collect the global data sets and make them available for people to be used. And this is not only in the theoretical level, so it has been happening, right? For example, for the AIS data sets, right? This week we are undertaking the AIS hackathon. So we invited teams around the world to compete and to exploit the data sets. And I hope that the result also can be presented in the next big data conference, for example. The first challenge is basically kind of like a solve, right? So we do have a platform, but at the same time, the platform has to be also supported and maintained, because everything has a cost. So this is falls into what you said, the co-investment, right? So I would call everyone to co-invest in a shared platform, so that everyone can be beneficials to everyone. And the next challenge is the human resource itself. Even though the platforms are available, the methodology are available, right? We have a lot of papers on how to convert the ship tracking or flight tracking to volume or monetary, right? The question is how to run this algorithm, and it requires specific skills, right? So that's why there's an emerging skills of data engineering or data scientists that are suited to this kind of the big data issues and problems, right? I mean, without them, we would never be able to process these huge data sets. I think this is also something that is faced by me and also by other panelists, right? On how to gather the right skills. And of course, I mean, these skills are highly demanded. So we also need to compete, right, in this space of the skills. I think that's my conclusions, right? Basically, we need to have a shared environment with a global data set indeed. And we also need to make sure that people are well trained and they are able to process and analyze big data sets. Thank you, Ivo.
Thank you, Marky. Thank you for your elaborate answer. Diego, can I turn to you? And that also, then I weave in the question that comes from the audience about standardization of location data and cleaning of data that comes into play when you want to use this data. And can you provide advice on this? Now, my question is related to this. So it's basically about, we do quite an interesting stuff, and the methodologies are all very well documented. But there's a step more to be taken to make this accessible for national statistical institutes, right? My question to you would be, how would the IMF see this to be transferred to countries to actually start applying similar techniques for their experimental data in this area? Diego.
Thank you very much, Ivo. And since I may not have a chance to speak later, I want to thank Marky and Sai for their fascinating presentations. And I'm looking forward to the second part as well, to continue learning from everyone. So advice on standardization. I think the key for us, maybe this is not a very concrete advice, but in a way, maybe it is. I think for us, what was key is to have an interdisciplinary team. It's four of us. Two of us are economists and two are data scientists, and I think that was really key for us. I don't think the final product would have been feasible just with economists or just with data scientists. Now, your second question is how. So first, I'll if you allow me, I'll rephrase the question. Instead of saying how the IMF sees things, I'll say how I see things.
I can imagine you don't want to talk
but
for the
so,
IMF as a whole. Yeah, your personal views on this.
So for us, we know that there are companies that are producing trade volume estimates based on AIS data, and we know we are not the first. And for us, the issue was first about transparency in the methodology, because for most of the companies doing this on a proprietary basis, they are doing it in a proprietary basis, meaning that you don't know how it's constructed. So for us, understanding how things can be constructed was part of what we wanted to achieve, not just the final product, but how to do it. And secondly, for us, it was also important to provide this as a public good, so that anyone can access. And for that, we are extremely grateful to the UN, to you for giving us the platform to disseminate these estimates in the way that we wanted, which is as a public good. I think most of the estimates that are of interest are already available on the UN platform and also in the working papers website. There is more that we hope to be able to share at some point, because we have estimates at the level of the ports, at the level of the vessels, of course. And eventually, I think we should also think of making available all the codes so that people can work with them. But we're still probably a few months away from that, because we still want to make improvements, and many of those improvements are already mentioned in the paper. And maybe I'll take advantage of the question and say that the reason we want to do improvements is that while our results work very well for most countries and for the world, there are some countries for which it doesn't work well, and we want to understand why. And since this is organized jointly with Statistics Korea, if Korea is one of the countries that I would like to improve our results for. So if there is anyone in the audience who has access to port call data for Korea, we would be extremely interested in collaborating to understand a bit better our results in this country. But this is the kind of things we're working on, and we look forward to further collaboration both with the UN and national statistical agencies.
Thank you, Diego. And really appreciated that also in your view, taking this forward, as a public good, it needs that partnership between international organizations, but also particularly with national statistical systems and offices. And thank you for reaching out to South Korea, and say, look, we're very interested in collaborating and understanding some of our data better. And I'm sure some of the members of the audience will react directly. I think they can contact COSTAT and then transmit that to us, and then we will transmit it through to you if your email is not on your presentation. But thank you for your response. Sai, I have a similar sort of questions, but maybe prying a little bit more deeper on this one, building on what Diego said. He says, I have to reach out to Korea to get my numbers better. But how do we really make an effort in bringing this to the countries in a very constructive public good sort of environment? And how do we do that? Not you maybe alone as ICAO, but maybe as international organizations, maybe with other partners, private sector partners, NSI. Your views on this, because we want to be able to bring this forward as a public good. Your views.
Absolutely. So ICO definitely is trying to take our work to member states, and it is doing it through its own dissemination platforms, as well as working collaboratively with the United Nations especially, and with other agencies, including the World Bank and the IMF. So what we do is we hold a series of conferences every year, in addition to the ones which we attend under the UN banner. But also we have our own big data events where we actually showcase the work which we have done. and make the applications available as much as possible to the member states and also to the industry partners. So we have some of these applications which are tailor-made for the member states. To the states, the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Civil Aviation. Also, these applications are also made available to airlines, airports, and navigation service providers. And we also provide access to the complete data sets for regulators. For example, our data, the big data sets which we collect and which we clean and which we combine with other data sets is also available to, say, the USFA, to the Eurocontrol, to the European Aviation Safety Agencies, and also other member states on request for a variety of reasons. As I said, these big data sets are used not only for economics, but also for safety and more importantly for environment. So we have built a lot of algorithms to calculate, say, safety parameters, as well as the environmental parameters, emissions, and this data we make it available freely to member states. And we explain it to them and we incentivize them to start using it through our dashboards and our data sets. We give them access to our Azure cloud platform. We provide them with documentation, and we encourage them to look at this data set as an complement to the official data set which is reported, as well as to sort of verify and validate each other's data sets. So we have a complete program going, and we work very closely with the UN and other agencies.
Yes, perfect. Thank you for elaborating on this and see that we're really trying to reach out and bringing this forward through webinars, methods, libraries, data, and code, and that we are absolutely open to work with anybody that is interested in advancing this field. So I really appreciate that. Now, I see here that Ronald passed me one more question, which is a technical one, Diego, so don't go away, but be very brief because I would like to turn to the second segment. Our friend Ivan Snow, who is the Chief Statistician of Suriname, asked, how do you actually bring value, monetary value to these volume numbers, Diego? So how do you actually do it? What sort of information do you have to link that to the cargo of the ship from volume to value? Just briefly.
So I can be very brief because the answer is that we don't do that. We only measure volumes. We think we could measure values, but only for very commoditized goods, such as crude oil. But otherwise, that's something that we don't do. We have ideas of how that might be done, but we think that's probably very challenging, especially for some ship types that carry vast varieties of goods, especially containerized container ships, basically. So the short answer is that we don't do that.
Yes.
And
it's going to be moved to the future agenda to actually be able to much better link. Yeah, it is somewhat more micro data linking in terms of vessel tracking with the individual numbers and linking that to the declaration forms at customs. So these are the developments that we still have to work on, but that probably would be a mechanism to actually get ship registers and customs data to actually start linking this in a systematic way. No, thank you for that. With that, the first segment is concluded. As Diego, yes, you're right. I will not turn back to this group because I think we need to give ample time for the others. Therefore, I would like to thank you also on behalf of the audience, to the three of you, to providing these very interesting insights on this work of international agencies. I would like to turn now to the second segment, which is much more of work that is built on the national initiatives, and this is excellent work as well. As I indicated, we have Catherine Smythe from ABS Australian Bureau of Statistics, Shang from the Chief Statistician from Bhutan, Mr. Cho from the Chung Myung University, and Dr. Uzur from Chief Statistician of Malaysia. I will not hold back giving more floor to myself, but immediately move to Catherine Smythe. Catherine, can you please start your presentation?
Hi everyone, my name's Catherine Smythe and I'm from the Consumer Price Index section at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Firstly, some brief background. The Australian CPI has used multilateral methods on supermarket scanner data since late 2017. The benefit of these methods has become very evident during this pandemic period, and particularly in regards to one aspect, which is expenditure weighting. So prior to the multilateral methods, the ABS used the classic fixed basket approach, but that didn't always fare so well in the case of particular shocks. So this was illustrated back in 2006 when Cyclone Larry devastated Australia's banana crops, and banana prices rose by 400%. Now, because the CPI used fixed weights at this time, the fruit expenditure class rose 83% over just 2 quarters as a result. This outcome did attract some scrutiny because, after all, consumers are price sensitive and would likely have substituted to a cheaper product. However, at the time, we had no accurate way to measure this substitution effect. Now, returning to 2020, once again, although for very different reasons, we've seen some big changes in expenditure. So stockpiling or panic buying, as Covid-19 started to ramp up in Australia, saw massive upticks in expenditure for some items, including long-life foods, cleaning products, and of course toilet paper. Under our old fixed weight methods, we would have encountered a similar issue as we did with bananas all those years ago, except we would have potentially understated the impact. But thanks to expenditure weighting, because expenditure was higher during that peak stockpiling period, the prices from this period contributed more to the movement than during other parts of the quarter, which is particularly evident in these figures that you can see here from the March quarter this year. So we compiled our scanner data indexes just a couple of weeks out from the quarter's end, so using 11 weeks worth of data, just to get a rough idea of the quarter's movements. Then, when we ran our final compilation using all 13 weeks of data, we were actually a bit surprised at just how much the numbers had changed. Under normal circumstances, the addition of 2 weeks of data would have minimal impact on the results, maybe a movement of 0.1 or 0.2 percentage points here or there. However, in the March quarter, as you can see, this situation was much more dramatic. And this is because the stockpiling, it peaked in the second half of March, but this was also accompanied by a reduction in discounts. Now, because stockpiling obviously saw an increase in expenditure, our methods meant that the prices from this period had a greater contribution to the quarter's movement. Now, before scanner data, we may have completely missed this price impact if it fell outside of our collection dates, or at least the impact might have been delayed until the following quarter's collection. One other advantage of the scanner data is the ability to remain relevant by introducing new products in a timely fashion. For example, the scanner data recorded face masks as soon as our supermarkets started selling them, which saves us the time-consuming process that is often associated with collecting prices for new products. Scanner data has also provided us with insights into both consumer and retailer behaviour, and that's greatly enhanced the economic narratives that we're able to convey to major stakeholders such as the Reserve Bank of Australia. The graphs on this slide are produced as part of our quarterly analysis. These particular ones are from the June quarter this year. So each graph on this slide shows in red the price and in blue the expenditure for one individual product at one particular supermarket chain across the 8 capital cities. Now we can see from the revenue that the stockpiling peaked in late March. A few interesting stories to emerge from this include minced meat, which you can see in the top left-hand corner, and that saw a large drop in prices following the revenue peak. So supermarkets actually overstocked a little bit, and they compensated for this with a combination of both 20% specials on mince, which they did publicise, but there's also an element of clearance pricing in that movement. Now, it's incredibly unusual that clearance prices would have an impact on the CPI, and that's what makes this story so notable. We were also able to see how after the stockpiling peak, demand for some products such as the pasta in the lower right-hand corner remained at elevated levels, or at least levels that are less sensitive to the absence of discounting, as more consumers turned to cook from home instead of eating out. The absence of discounting is evident by those flat red lines at the current end of each graph. For some products, specials did reappear later in the quarter, either to their usual magnitude, which you can see for tuna and toilet paper, to a reduced level, which you can see for meat pies, or not at all, which you can see for pasta and canned tomato. Little pieces of information such as this are quite useful in painting a more complete picture of the economy. Finally, the timeliness of the scanner data has enabled what is normally the CPI research team to pivot their efforts in response to the pandemic and produce tailored weekly reports for the Australian Treasury and Reserve Bank. These reports have evolved over time in response to the situation, detailing aggregate revenue and quantity by product category, as well as by new categories such as perishable versus non-perishable foods. The team has performed analysis on price and size quantiles, the annual growth for selected products and regions, and even an experimental investigation into discounting. Some of this analysis has been published in other ABS releases, such as our retail trade release. I'll leave it there, but hopefully it's quite evident just how beneficial scanner data has been to the ABS in its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Probably I was muted. Thank you, Catherine, for presenting this very interesting sort of development that we can not only get the price right, but we can get the weights also right, which is a totally new sort of development using scanner data. A lot of work is available now also on the global platform with a big group of about 30 people that work in different aspects of scanner data. So we will talk about that in the questions going forward. I would now like to turn to Shan Chering from the Chief Statistician from Bhutan, who has an excellent presentation about the latest sort of developments in the measurement of the socio-economic impact in Bhutan from a business pulse survey. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Ivo, moderator for the session, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I am Chimit Sring, Director of National Statistics Bureau. It's my pleasure to present the findings of the rapid socio-economic impact assessment of COVID-19 on tourism and allied sectors in Bhutan. The impact assessment is an outcome of joint effort between the royal government and the UN agencies in Bhutan. The UNDP Bhutan office and the National Statistics Bureau coordinated the assessment. One might ask, why focus on tourism? Tourism is an important growth sector for Bhutan, and it was identified as one of the 5 jewels to strengthen the economy. Tourism is one of the major sources of foreign currency earnings. The sector contributes around 3 to 5% of the total domestic annual revenue. Around 16% of the working population are dependent on tourism for their livelihood. And tourism has the potential for creating more jobs. And finally, tourism is the sector that is immediately and significantly affected by the pandemic due to restriction on travel and tourism. The main objective of the assessment was to gain a quick understanding of the overall impact of the pandemic on individuals and businesses engaged in tourism and related sectors, and to find out the social and economic vulnerabilities of the affected individuals, their coping abilities, and alternative employment preferences. The sample frame includes 9 subsectors, and the assessment covered 5 districts most visited by the tourists. Close to 1,300 people were interviewed over phone to meet the physical distancing requirement. Now, I would like to present some of the findings. Key finding number 1. The impact of COVID-19 is already deep, widespread, and cross-cutting. In other words, the crisis has had a grave impact on lives, affected many people, and increased vulnerability across many dimensions. The decline of the tourism sector has significant impact on individual level as well as household level livelihood. 32% of the employees had already lost their job or were sent on leave without pay. Income source is not diversified beyond tourism for 63% of the households. 74% of affected households reported significant drop in their income. Many households lack savings to sustain through the crisis. 70% of the respondents reported no savings or other means of subsistence starting immediately. 31% reported their savings can only sustain them up to 1 month. And only 22% of the respondents reported having income or savings to sustain beyond 6 months. One out of 4 households reported having 1 or more vulnerable members in their household. Vulnerable member here refers to people with physical and mental disabilities, elderly, chronically ill, and pregnant and lactating women. Almost 70% of the households with vulnerable members reported a significant drop in their income. Majority of the business owners and employees have loans and their capacity to repay is compromised. 80% of the business owners have loans and 44% of them are not in a position to pay their EMIs immediately. Among the employees, 40% are indebted and around 36% of them are not able to make repayments immediately. Finding number 2, there is a strong interest in alternate employment, especially in few vocations. The respondents reported strong interest in alternate employment, especially in agriculture, followed by delivery services, electrician, plumbing, and carpentry. Interestingly, gender played an important role in their choice of alternative employment and occupation of interest. Finding number 3, while the impact of COVID-19 is significant, coping capacities are limited. Seeking government help was among the popular coping strategies, and curbing consumption was among the least popular coping strategies reported. Moving back to villages was among the top 3 choices of coping with crisis. Therefore, urban to rural migration may be forthcoming. The last slide, recommendation and conclusion. The impact due to decline in tourism is significant. Given the current scenario, travel restrictions around the world are likely to continue for an extended period. It is unlikely that people will start traveling for leisure anytime soon. As such, prolonged restrictions in travel and tourism will leave many unemployed and marginalized. Therefore, a robust response strategy is required to address the needs of those who are most vulnerable and to address immediate, medium, and long-term needs of the tourism sector. Finally, I would like to thank the UN agencies in Bhutan for the continued collaboration and cooperation. And it's important to engage and involve the national statistical offices and countries in any statistical activities. Thank you. Back to you, Ivo.
Thank you, Chim. Excellent presentation. I really enjoyed this because it shows that collaboration with the National Statistical Office and international UN organizations at the country level really can bring forward excellent sort of insights in particular sector, in this case, the tourism sector, and also the severity of it. So thank you for bringing that forward as tools of bringing, having the capability as a statistical office of your own, to actually bring forward these numbers on a very short notice, and undertaking these surveys, as good indications of the impact of the pandemic. And I'm sure you will continue, this kind of surveys to actually inform, the government and the public about the impact of the pandemic. So thank you very much about these new sort of initiatives, and I'll come back to that with questions on that in the Q&A. So thank you for that, Jam. I would like to turn to Mr. Yo from the Sangmayung University in Korea. Again, I've seen the presentation, excellent presentation about changing consumption pattern. The floor is yours, Mr. Cho.
Hello everyone, my name is Kyung-won Yoo. I'm working at Sangmyung University in Seoul, Korea. Today's topic of my presentation is the comparison of consumption patterns between COVID-19 impact and the past economic crisis in Korea. Here is the contents of my presentation. First, I provide the motivation for this presentation. And second, I analyze major characteristics of past crises in Korea after 1990 using national account data of the Bank of Korea. And third, I also analyzed income and consumption changes by household characteristics during the crisis using household income and expenditure survey data. In the last chapter, I will discuss the possible economic consequence of COVID-19 shock in Korea. Motivation. The past economic crisis experienced in Korea for the past 30 years includes the Asian financial crisis, the credit card debt crisis, and the global financial crisis in 2008. Currently, the significant impact of COVID-19 has affected the economy, and many people are very concerned that it will be another major economic crisis since 1990 in Korea. Here, we analyze the impact on consumption of the major crisis we have experienced over the past 30 years, and based on this, we look at the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 on the economy, especially the household consumption sector. Okay, this is the second chapter, Major Characteristics of Past Crisis in Korea. In the past crisis, consumption had decreased significantly compared to income, and thus household saving rate has increased during the crisis. As you can see in the table figure 1, trends of household income and consumption changes, it seems that changes in consumption expenditure, you can see the blue line, during the crisis were more sensitive than the income growth rate, the orange line. So as shown in figure 2, the household net saving rate recorded the highest during the Asian financial crisis in 1998. This pattern was also seen in the credit card debt crisis in 2003, as well as global financial crisis in 2008. Other countries also show similar patterns during the crisis, including global financial crisis and COVID-19 shock. You can see the next figure, also the saving rates in the EU and the United States. As you can see, during the global financial crisis, EU countries shows the highest the saving rate, and also during the COVID-19 shock, the saving rate is increasing a lot, as you can see in the United States also. As shown in figure 4, you can see the share of consumption items was adjusted according to the income shock, with a decrease in the share of durable goods, semi-durable goods, you can see, and an increase in the share of non-durable goods and services during the past crisis. More specifically, among the 12 consumption expenditure items, apparel, shoes, household goods and services, and food lodging items showed a remarkable decrease in composition of consumption expenditure during the crisis, as you can see in the figure 5 and 6. Third chapter, In the event of a crisis, the vulnerable groups, such as low-income and temporary daily workers, etc., are found to be more affected. You can see the detailed information in Table 1 and Table 2. In the Table 1, the economic shock during the crisis, especially the primary income shock, appeared differently among income classes, and the income shock of the lowest income classes in the first quintile, you can see, was greater than that of the other classes. Looking at the adjustment of consumption by income classes in Table 2, it seems that the first income quintile, you can see, which experienced the greatest income shock during the Asian financial crisis, did not make a large adjustment in consumption expenditure compared to other classes. The implication of this result is that the low-income vulnerable groups have relatively little room for adjustment of consumption when an income shock occurs. On the other hand, the stable income groups such as the fifth income quintile and the regular workers seem to have prepared for the crisis in the progress by excessively reducing consumption expenditure and increasing saving. So similar patterns appear in COVID-19 shock, as you can see in Table 1 and Table 2. The last chapter. When comparing the past crisis in Korea, the crisis in which income decline and adjustment of consumption expenditure were the most is the Asian financial crisis, and the ongoing COVID-19 shock shows some similar patterns to the Asian financial crisis in terms of adjustment of consumption expenditure. Looking at past crises and recent data set, the COVID-19 shock appears not only largely centered on the vulnerable, but also appears to have a great impact on the self-employed class due to the spread of a non-face-to-face economy, although the impact of a second wave of the COVID-19 may be severer. Finally, data shows that there is a high possibility that overconsumption contraction will continue, and the excessive increase in saving of the middle class and high-income class due to the uncertainty of COVID-19 in Korea. In this case, unlike the past crisis, the COVID-19 economic crisis may result from a consumption shock rather than an income shock, and an economic crisis may occur due to the excessive consumption adjustment for uncertainty of COVID-19, and economic downturn will intensify. However, if the uncertainty of the spread of the infectious disease is resolved, such as the development of a vaccine for COVID-19 in the near future, the accumulated savings may act as a major factor of rapid consumption recovery from the past experience of the crisis. That's the all of my presentation. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cho. That is, again, an excellent presentation, very timely.
Hello, everyone.
Very timely also in bringing this news insight forward. So I'm really impressed also about the pace with which this data is becoming available to assist policymakers in understanding the impact of the crisis on Korea, looking at consumption and saving patterns. So thank you for that insight and also the methodology that is being used. I would like now to turn to Dr. Uzer, our dear friend, Chief Statistician from Malaysia, who has an important story to bring and information to share about his undertaking of a specific survey on business pulse. Dr. Uzer, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum and very good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of us in good health, and together we fight against the COVID-19 pandemic that is affecting the world today. Thank you very much, Mr. Ivo from UN Statistics Division. I am Muhammad Uzair Mahidin, Chief Statistician of Malaysia, and I will be your presenter for this session, and I will cover the topic on monitoring the socio-economic impact of COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, for your information, Movement Control Order (MCO) is a preventive measure by the federal government of Malaysia in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in the country on 18th of March 2020. Malaysia Movement Control Order began when the Prime Minister of Malaysia announced the first MCO to last between 8 until 31st of March 2020. And then the MCO period is extended consistently till the fourth phase and continue with conditional MCO plan to ease the lockdown by allowing business to open. On 7 June 2020, the Prime Minister announced that CMCO would end 9 June 2020, with the country entering into recovery movement control order RMCO phase between 10 of June until 31st August 2020. Then interstate travel would be allowed from 10 June 2020 under the RMCO, except in the areas under enhanced MCO. Malaysia has now entered phase 6 of the conditional movement control order, which has been extended until December 2020. Following the global COVID-19 pandemic and living in the era of big data, Department of Statistics Malaysia has implemented new norm in the production and dissemination of official statistics. Also, where we consistently assist the government in the making evidence-based decision making to address the COVID-19 pandemic crisis and ensure the well-being of the community. To monitor the impact of the socio-economy on the of the country, the government has set up action-oriented council, namely the High Level National Economic Council, and another one is the Working Technical Labor National Council. So we Department of Statistics really involved directly on the working level or technical level of National Economic Council, where we provide all the latest statistics on the real time and daily basis statistic to the council. DOSM has moving toward the big data analytics in the analytic era in producing more reliable and timeliness official statistics. The objective of Stat BDA are to modernize the data collection, to allow high accuracy, to reduce respondent burden, and to use as supplement for existing data in production of certain statistics, and to produce new statistic indicators. The overall landscape of Stat BDA project is focusing mainly on the project deliverables, which are establishing big data infrastructure, development of Stat BDA module, and building skill set in data science field. One of Stat BDA module that has been developed in DOSM, big data is price intelligence, is involved a modernization of data collection tool for improving the quality of consumer price index in Malaysia. Data collection modernization that adopting web scraping techniques to scrape price data from related website for consumer price index compilation and improving the quality of data. At this time of COVID, DOSM fully uses price intelligence in obtaining commodity price data and issuing the consumer price index in the country. The price intelligence module in the Department of Statistics Malaysia encompasses of a price frequency, distribution of average price by strata category, trend of average price by strata category, trend of average price by state, price distribution by state, average price by state, and the price mode. The global freight has impacted many countries in terms of demand and supply due to COVID-19. As at epicenter, food production was disrupted due to government restriction and caused widespread concern about the need for commodities for adequately daily living and rising commodity prices. As such, DOSM has created a landing page showing the average price change for the selected item recorded during the MCO. To facilitate public understanding the price of selected goods such as fruit, vegetable, and livestock product are displayed using an interactive infographic. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to complying with the production of statistics according to the FY Readiness Calendar, additional and new reports, statistics also have been released successfully during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. DOSM managed to release new daily, weekly report of statistics based on the government requirement to assist a country in the COVID pandemic crisis. Among the report we produce are statistic and info media. These provide the summary of daily news coverage based on local and international news agency on COVID-19 issues and connecting the effect of current economic condition. This information will be used to analyze the impact of COVID-19 in compiling national statistics, public maturity assessment on official statistics, and real-time news on official statistics is one of the modules developed under STAT BDA for the sentiment analysis toward any specific keyword through online social media. In particular, during the pandemic crisis, this module helps in covering and generating news about COVID widely and quickly, as the latest DOSM successfully produced 59 volumes of daily news coverage with a brief description of COVID-19 in statistics. Newsletter on the selected key macro statistic, we have 70 series were released since the MCO was introduced in Malaysia via DOSM portal and social media using the infographic. The compilation covers stock market index, currency, petroleum, palm oil, rubber prices, financial related information that was presented in the form of daily, monthly, quarterly, and annual key macro statistics that highlighted the major tendency of the nation socio-economic development. And this approach is very have a great impact where the statistic communication between the official statistic and the people at large is become better, especially to get the better understanding on the state of the economy during the peak of the crisis. On the DOSM intelligence stat report by state and also by zone, and also the special bulletin, DOSM also furnish information on state and the sectoral overview on the impact of the pandemic COVID-19 and the movement control to the Economic Council and policymaker as mentioned earlier. And we also provide the special landing page in portal that was developed by our team as initiative to inform the public about the status of COVID-19 outbreak in Malaysia based on the official data from the Ministry of Health, Malaysia, and media agencies. The real-time statistics are presented using an interactive visualization or infographic to help the public to grasp the information. This page displays an interactive map and visual that show where the virus has spread, as well as the number of cases per state which reported by the Crisis Preparedness and Response Center, CPRC, Ministry of Health Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, and during the crisis also we conducted several special survey to see the effect of the COVID-19. In fact, we have 3 special survey which are conducted online to determine the effect of COVID-19 pandemic to the economy. The survey carried out for the period of March to May 2020. One of the survey is the special survey effect of COVID-19 on the economy and on individual, round 1, and it was conducted for the period 23rd to 31st March 2020, and is comprised of 3 modules and have 21 questions. And we got very good, strong response. We have about 250,000 response from the public, and this survey we capture the qualitative personal opinion on the economic, employment, and the spending pattern. And then we have also special survey that we conduct for the round 2 on 10 to 24 of April. And we also got a very great response from the citizen. And we also have the special survey on the focus for the company and the impact of the COVID-19 to the company and businesses. And this was conducted on 10 April to 1st May. And all the result of the survey been analyzed and presented based on the feedback and the quality opinion, and this been used to make some of the key decision and also how to handle the impact of COVID in the context of the short term and also medium term. And of course, the methodology of this survey did not neglecting the security aspect and the government recommendation in the curbing the pandemic COVID. And the Department of Statistics Malaysia received the modules operandi of survey and information collected. And on the in terms of the statistically, the sampling method used is not the probability sampling, and the analysis presented are based on the respondent who participated in the survey. And we also put the caution that some of the finding need to be looked more caution and not to be generalized. In contrast to the other routine survey which are conducted by the Department of Statistics Malaysia, such as monthly labour survey, quarterly employment survey, and household income and expenditure survey that implemented routinely, yearly, and also twice for every 5 years. So for the detailed finding of the survey and the method I mentioned here are available in the portal, in the DOSM portal, in the form of the interactive infographic and the DOSM social media. Other initiative, one of the new norm of DOSM is to hold a virtual press conference via Facebook Live and Skype. And we see that virtual press conference is the very good platform for the Department of Statistics to announce the statistic publication based on the advance release calendar. And normally the virtual press conference is held at 12 noon, and we take the great opportunity to explain in more detail on the any new data that we release. And we got a very good feedback, and the session is very lively, a lot of interactive. We have received a lot of questions from the public. And other than that, we also have what we call the stat alert, static in the infographic aimed to educating and alerting the public to the statistic release by department. So all the infographic have been disseminated through social media platform, including WhatsApp. And as today, we release for this year about 148 stat alert on statistic. And on other than that, we also produce regularly newsletter, and we produce the letter number is about 77 newsletter. And we encourage our officer to improve or increase our writing. What we encourage to do the blog writing, including the topic on the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. So all these published statistic indicator and initiative actually is really helpful. It's been used by the government and the authority, and also much more for the people at large. And we also share our experience and practices to the rest of the world, including at the UN ECE webpage on the COVID-19 response. And finally, I would like to also inform that during our latest release on the gross domestic product, where we experience the very severe contraction in our economy, the gross domestic product for the second quarter contracted at 17.1%. So in order for us to elevate to improve the statistic communication, beside the quarterly growth, we also managed to put how is the growth is look like in terms of the monthly growth. So it's seen that the most severe one is recorded in the month of April, where our GDP monthly GDP growth is contracted negative 28.6%. In May, 19.5%, and the final month of the second quarter, it was June. The GDP growth contracted 3.2%. So it sums up the overall growth of a negative 71%. So when we release this information, is really come down the public at large, where they know that the economy in the recovery mode. This is very important. How very real example where with a good statistic, how we can convey that the real scenario in the form of more frequency. And we know that the expectation of the stakeholder very high on the statistical system. So we have to go extra mile to manage the whatever the big data available. In term, we produce more than about 300 volume indicator on the monthly basis. I think this is really helpful for the people at large to understanding what actually happening, what actually happened in our socio-economy. That's all, Ivo, from me.
Oh, thank you. Excellent overview. Thank you, Dr. Uter. It is really enjoyable to see how your institute can really bring things forward again on such a short notice, using big data, building up dashboards, doing new pulse surveys and the like, and bringing that data all together. So congratulations in sharing that broad overview about what is now possible in this day and age, right? In reacting. I think that's where we are. I'm conscious that we actually 6 minutes over time, but maybe I want to just give each of you a few minutes to reflect, if that's okay with the organizers. Can we do a quick round? Can I get feedback from the organizers if we can have a quick round on this? Mike, if not, you let us know. But my question is a simple one. We see there's a lot of new techniques, and that also came through the questions that have been posed while you were all speaking about new techniques. How do they compare with the older traditional techniques in terms of CPI, Catherine? How do you communicate that new sort of development? There's a whole discussion about, can we maintain trust when we come out with these experimental data? That is an important aspect that we have to consider. Another important aspect that we have to consider, is this now the new normal? Are we really, as Dr. User is indicating, we go from quarterly GDPs to monthly GDP? So are we really changing the frequency on some sort of permanent basis? Are we trying to indicate that we need to do these pulse surveys more regularly, so we cannot go away and say, look, after COVID, or we will do it only on a quarterly basis? There is now a demand much more for high frequency numbers, and how do we actually address that? And then an important aspect, and I think that was mentioned also, is about the geographical detail people want to know. So Mr. Cho, you do this at the Korean, let's say, national level, but people are very interested, as you know, what actually happens in communities, in cities, and how do that affect the savings and consumption rate? Is there a lot of differences, and should we, get much more sort of investment going in geographic areas? So I just go one by one. It's a broad suite of questions that come out of out of the audience. Pick your choose. The most important one for me is how do we work together, increasingly sharing these communication strategies, these methods, so that we can learn much more actively from each other going forward. So that will be for me a major, new thinking about how we bring this information together and share it and make it available to other countries. Catherine, I start with you.
Certainly. So you mentioned, how do you get trust? How do you get sort of buy-in from the people? And I think the approach that the ABS has taken has largely been about being very upfront with communication. So we've been developing our methods to work with scanner data over a number of years. And at each sort of stage of the process, we have actually released something publicly on the ABS website to say, this is where the ABS is looking to go. These are the methods that we're looking to use. And so that approach has sort of made people become very familiar with the idea and supportive, and we've encouraged feedback as well. Then, of course, we've always got the relevant legislation which protects all of our statistics and which obviously leads to a level of trust. Just very quickly, so I saw that I've got a question here regarding sort of different collection methods that we've had to use during the pandemic. So obviously we've had to take our field collectors out of the field due to personal safety and movement restrictions. So we have had to rely a little bit more heavily on things like web collections and phone calls. When it comes to web scraping, which was mentioned, so we've been web scraping for a number of years now, and we've introduced it into the CPI in sort of a small way, so just using a direct replacement method. We didn't sort of actually use it in production any more than usual this quarter, but we still used it for confrontation purposes a lot. So making sure that what we've got in our sample is aligning with what we've web scraped. But it's currently an area of development for the CPI in Australia. We're looking at using the multilateral methods that we currently use on scanner data and using them on web scraped data. And the really big challenge there is basically that expenditure weighting that I talked about so much. So expenditure weighting, it's great if you've got the data, but when you're web scraping, you don't have that. So that's the big challenge, but it is something that we're doing quite a bit of work on at the moment.
Yeah. No, thank you, Catherine, for that insight. Shine, same sort of questions. There was a particular question: how did you collect the data for your poll survey in the tourism industry? But more broadly about how do you communicate about it? How did you educate your audience about the new method that you bring forward? How do you maintain trust? These sort of aspects, and how do we work together in sharing these lessons from COVID? Shaim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivo. Just to share, as I've presented, the informations were collected through telephone using CAPI.
Yeah.
So therefore, we work very closely with the other agencies like the Tourism Council of Bhutan, the Ministry of Labor and Human Resources, Prime Minister's Office, and the Gross National Happiness Commission, which is a planning commission in Bhutan. So we worked while UNDP and National Statistics Bureau took the lead role. Those agencies were very much part of the assessment. Yeah. So this is how we have done it. And just to touch on limitations of this study, due to the while the survey, through the assessment, we are able to reveal useful data and insights on the immediate change in the livelihoods. However, we are not able to capture social aspects of the vulnerability meaningfully, owing to the structure as well as the evolving nature of the crisis, as well as limited sampling frame. So therefore, going forward, I think we need to really do a comprehensive assessment whereby we bring in more subsectors that are related to tourism, as well as extend our coverage. So this will validate the finding of the rapid assessment. So going forward, we are looking forward for that assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. No, much appreciated. for that new insight. Mr. Cho, also the same sort of questions towards you, and maybe respond to some of the questions that came from the audience. The floor is yours. Mr. Cho, one of the questions, I don't know whether you've seen it, but it's in the chat, is, let me find that. 1 second. One second, I'm almost there. Do you have any data regarding the state of indebtedness of households during the period of indebtedness prior to the pandemic?
Well, actually, we only have the national data for analyzing this kind of past crisis. So I'd like to say that it is needed to use the big data, such as the scanned data, to analyze properly. So I think that this kind of conference is very helpful for the researchers such as me to analyze this kind of impact of the COVID-19 timely. So I think that this conference is very beneficial for the researchers to analyze this kind of impact.
Excellent. Now that's a very important statement. I think that basically going forward, we have to cement these relationships with the academic institution and start to learn from each other and actually start applying that, because also the academics are very keen of having more regular, recurrent, frequent data, because that's where the demand is at the moment. I finally turn to you, Mohammed, in terms of a question that I have. Are we investing enough? You know, in the whole suite that you presented, you finalized that you also had much more sort of geographically specialized data. Should we start to bring, you know, the experience together to actually advance much better the need to combine statistics with geography? Your views?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. No, but Dr. Uzer, is for you also, is that an area where you think that we should do more in communicating more clearly the impacts of the pandemic?
Thank you very much. I think in response to the pandemic now, I think we need, as the National Psycho Office, to have the courage that how we can utilize whatever information around us, especially on what we call the partial information. So how we manage to convert the partial information to more structure and readily that the data can be communicated to the public at large, that can be easy to understand. And during the crisis, among the issue that the people or the public want to know about the employment, the jobs, on the economy, on the price, on the consumption, on the food security. And in terms of National Statistics Office of Malaysia, DOSM, actually we have the very good framework where we can collaborate and we can check, for example, in terms of the impact on our economy basis on the mirror statistic, for example, how we can capitalize the import export data from our trading partner as well. So in sum, I can say that during this final crisis, I think it's the opportunity for us to make that to make the people or the country know that the National Statistical Office can function very well, and we can collaborate with all parties from the association, from the any interested party that can share their information. So it's our responsible to also before we agree to take all the information that released by any party as a part of the official statistic, we have to check the quality. And we also have to convey strictly what is the limitation of the statistic. And finally, Ivo and the rest of the panel and also the audience, I want to show that this is among the important area where we manage during the cases where we increase our communication. What we call we have to have the what we call the statistic review. Some people they just look at the labor per se, just look at the economy, just look at the prices. But our role now, how to connect all these statistics and put the right perspective and the contact, and the people can know actually what is really happening. And on top of that, for example, we produce, for example, a newsletter. This one we can check what the impact of COVID for the top 20 income bracket. We know that the impact is very different, because, for example, the top 20 now cannot travel to rest of the world. How they are spending looks like. So many newsletter we released and we communicate to the public at last. And during this time we not only serve for the M1 user, but also the public at large. And more important thing, how to make the statistic more in the form of layman term. And we want they feel that the statistic is their statistic. So we manage that to show that the statistic is the part of the public goods. That's all from me.
Thank you. No, very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear panelists, for your insight. I thought it was a very rich discussion to get it from the national perspective and the academic perspective. And we see that there's been a lot of courage in releasing experimental data, but at the same time that we had learned to communicate well about it, be transparent, maintain that trust that are needed. But we have to release this data. We cannot hold back. We have to be willing to be more experimental, more agile, more iterative to actually release this data. And I thank you for sharing that. And I think going forward, this will be the new normal. So we have to really look at our methodologies, how we combine that experimental data with official statistics in terms of communication, trust, and the like. So I'd like to thank you all. Let me mention you specifically, Catherine Smythe, Chem Shinjiring from Bhutan, Kyung Yo from Korea, and Dr. Uzra from Malaysia. Thank you very much for your insight. It's really appreciated. Great insights. And it gives a lot of promise of where we are and how we can take it forward. Also, before I close, I would like to thank the first three speakers. That was Marky Marion, that was Diego Caldera from the IMF, and our dear Kulif Sai from ICAO. Thank you very much for being with us. I think we have shown that we are making great progress in the area of new data, how we communicate while maintaining trust. Thank you very much for your contributions, and good night. And good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you. And I close the session. Thank you.
Thank you.